Donald Trump just did something that nobody in Washington, Tehran, or anywhere else on Earth expected. Not a military strike, not another round of sanctions, not the aggressive posturing that has defined American policy toward Iran for the last 4 decades. Trump sent a message to Iran's newly selected supreme leader. And what that message contained has left the entire foreign policy establishment in a state of complete disbelief. Not cautious surprise, not diplomatic concern, disbelief. Because Trump didn't threaten, Trump didn't demand, Trump didn't issue ultimatums or deadlines or the kind of maximum pressure language that has been the foundation of his Iran strategy since 2017. Trump offered. The details of what he offered are still emerging through diplomatic back channels and intelligence leaks that the White House has been unable to suppress. But the broad outlines are now clear enough to understand why senior officials at the State Department reportedly described the communication as a complete departure from everything we've been doing. Here's what we know. Within 6 hours of Iran's assembly of experts confirming Mojtaba Khamenei as the new supreme leader, Trump dispatched a message through Swiss intermediaries. That's the standard channel for U.S.-Iran communication when direct contact is politically impossible. The Swiss have carried messages between Washington and Tehran for 45 years. They know how to deliver sensitive communications without leaving fingerprints, but this message was different. The Swiss ambassador in Tehran reportedly requested an emergency meeting with Iranian foreign ministry officials, not a scheduled diplomatic exchange. An emergency meeting at 2 a.m. local time. The kind of meeting that happens when something has changed so fundamentally that normal channels and normal timelines no longer apply. What Trump offered in that message, according to 3 separate sources with knowledge of the communication, was this: full recognition of Mojtaba Khamenei as the legitimate leader of Iran, immediate suspension of all sanctions imposed since 2018, a commitment to withdraw American military forces from Iraq and Syria within 18 months, and direct presidential-level negotiations in a neutral country within 30 days. That's not a negotiating position, that's capitulation with extra steps. And the question everyone is now asking is the same question that has no good answer. What does Trump know that made him reverse 40 years of American policy in a single message? Here's what's actually happening behind the diplomatic language, because the context of this offer matters more than the offer itself. Mojtaba Khamenei is not his father. That's the first thing every intelligence analyst who has studied him emphasizes. Ali Khamenei, the previous supreme leader, was cautious, calculated, strategic in ways that prioritized regime survival over ideological purity. He understood that direct confrontation with the United States carried existential risks for the Islamic Republic, and he calibrated Iran's actions accordingly. Mojtaba is different. Western intelligence assessments describe him as more ideologically rigid than his father, more willing to accept costs, more convinced that confrontation with America is not a risk to be managed, but a duty to be fulfilled. He spent 2 decades managing Iran's internal security apparatus, suppressing dissent, coordinating with the Revolutionary Guard's intelligence arm, and building relationships with the hardest-line elements of the Iranian establishment. This is not a reformer. This is not a pragmatist. This is someone who believes that Iran's destiny requires confrontation with American power, and who has spent his entire career preparing for exactly that confrontation. The transition of power in Iran was completed in 72 hours. That speed tells you something important. There was no succession crisis, no factional infighting, no power vacuum that outside powers could exploit. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work. Ali Khamenei died. The assembly of experts convened. Mojtaba was confirmed. The Revolutionary Guard pledged loyalty. The government continued functioning. 45 years of American strategy assumed that leadership transitions in Iran would create instability. That assumption just died alongside the old supreme leader. And Trump knows this. The intelligence briefings he's received over the last 72 hours reportedly painted a picture that contradicts everything his administration has been saying publicly. Iran is not breaking. Iran is not ready to surrender. Iran's new leader is not looking for an off-ramp. Iran's military capabilities have not been degraded by sanctions or strikes or pressure campaigns. The private intelligence assessment, according to officials who have seen it, concluded that continued escalation leads to one of 2 outcomes: a war America cannot win quickly, or a confrontation that risks nuclear escalation. Trump's offer wasn't generosity. It was recognition of reality, the kind of recognition that requires abandoning 4 decades of strategic assumptions in a single encrypted message. But Trump's offer, as dramatic as it is, isn't even the most significant development of the last 24 hours, because Iran's response to that offer tells you everything about what kind of conflict we're actually in. Iran said no, not we'll consider it, not we need more details, not the diplomatic hedging that typically accompanies back-channel negotiations. No, delivered through the same Swiss intermediary within 4 hours of receiving Trump's message. and the reasoning Iran provided was more significant than the rejection itself. Iran's message back to Washington reportedly contained 3 points. Point 1. Recognition of Mojtaba Khamenei's legitimacy is not America's to give. He is the supreme leader because the Islamic Republic's constitutional process selected him. American recognition is irrelevant to his authority. Iran does not need American permission to have a government. Point 2. Sanctions suspension is insufficient. Iran demands permanent removal of all sanctions, full restoration of frozen assets totaling approximately $300 billion, and formal American acknowledgement that the sanctions were illegal under international law. Point 3. American withdrawal from Iraq and Syria is expected regardless of negotiations. Iran's position is that American presence in those countries is illegal occupation, and withdrawal is a legal obligation, not a concession to be traded. In other words, Iran told Trump that everything he offered was either meaningless, insufficient, or already owed. And then came the part that reportedly caused what one White House official described as significant concern. Iran's message concluded with what diplomatic analysts are calling a conditional threat structure. If negotiations begin, Iran will suspend offensive operations against American assets in the region. If negotiations do not begin within 14 days, Iran will consider the American offer rejected and respond accordingly. Respond accordingly. That phrase is doing a lot of work. Iran didn't specify what accordingly means. They didn't need to. America just watched 7 bases get hit with 133 missiles in 18 minutes. America just saw what Iran's response capabilities look like. The ambiguity isn't confusion, it's leverage. Trump offered surrender terms. Iran responded with a counter-ultimatum. And now America has 14 days to decide whether to accept conditions that would fundamentally reshape the global order. Let's talk about what's happening across the region and in Washington right now, because the reaction to Trump's offer has created chaos on multiple fronts simultaneously. Israel found out about Trump's message through intelligence intercepts, not through Allied notification. Think about what that means. The United States sent a message to Iran offering to withdraw from Syria, and Israel, the country most directly affected by American presence in Syria, was not informed in advance. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly called the White House within 2 hours of learning about the message. The call lasted 8 minutes. Israeli officials describe it as extremely direct. American officials describe it as the most difficult conversation of the administration. Israel's position is clear and has been stated publicly within hours of the leak. Any American withdrawal from Syria that does not address Hezbollah's military infrastructure and Iranian entrenchment is unacceptable. Israel will not accept a diplomatic resolution that leaves Iranian forces within striking distance of Israeli territory. If America negotiates such an agreement, Israel will act independently to protect its security. That's not diplomatic language. That's a threat to conduct military operations without American approval or coordination. Saudi Arabia's response was different but equally significant. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has not issued any public statement. The Saudi government has not commented on Trump's offer. Complete silence from Riyadh. But here's what isn't silent. Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, the Public Investment Fund with $930 billion in assets, began repositioning investments within hours of the leak. Defense contractors, energy infrastructure, regional development projects, money moving in patterns that suggest preparation for a fundamental change in the regional security architecture. When Saudi Arabia doesn't talk but starts moving money, that's the clearest signal of what they actually expect. Meanwhile, in Washington, Trump's own party is in open revolt. Senator Lindsey Graham held a press conference 4 hours ago calling the offer the worst foreign policy decision since Chamberlain at Munich. He didn't say that privately. He said it on camera, knowing it would be broadcast globally, knowing it would be seen in Tehran. The Republican Senate caucus is reportedly divided between members who support Trump's negotiating approach and members who believe he's capitulating to an enemy. The division is not subtle. It's playing out in real time on television, social media, and in congressional hallways. And the Pentagon is preparing for both scenarios simultaneously. CENTCOM has begun what officials describe as contingency planning for accelerated withdrawal timelines. Simultaneously, CENTCOM has positioned additional assets for potential offensive operations. The military is preparing to leave and preparing to escalate at the same time because nobody knows which order they'll receive. Let's be honest about what Trump is actually trying to do, because the surface narrative obscures the strategic calculation underneath. Trump is running for re-election in a political environment where his base is increasingly skeptical of foreign military commitments. The isolationist wing of the Republican Party, the wing that Trump himself activated and empowered, does not want another Middle East war. They do not want American soldiers dying for Saudi Arabia or Israel or anyone else. They want troops home and money spent domestically. Trump's offer to Iran is, at one level, a campaign message. It says to his base, "I'm the president who ends wars, not the president who starts them." But here's the problem with that calculation. Iran doesn't care about American domestic politics. Iran's new supreme leader has a 14-day timeline, not a November election timeline. And Iran's demands, if accepted, would represent the most significant American strategic retreat since Vietnam. Consider what Iran is actually asking for. $300 billion in frozen assets returned. That's money that would immediately fund Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and every Iranian proxy operation across the region. That's money that would finance missile production, drone development, and military infrastructure for the next decade. Full withdrawal from Iraq and Syria. That's the end of American influence in the Levant. That's abandoning Kurdish allies who fought ISIS alongside American forces. That's leaving Israel surrounded by Iranian-aligned forces with no American buffer. Acknowledgement that sanctions were illegal. That's a precedent that undermines every future sanctions regime against any country. That's Russia and China immediately demanding the same treatment. That's the end of economic warfare as a tool of American foreign policy. Trump's offer was dramatic. Iran's counter-demands are transformational. And the gap between them is not something that closes in 14 days of negotiation, which leaves two scenarios. Scenario 1. Trump accepts Iran's terms or something close to them. America retreats. Iran ascends. The Middle East realigns around Iranian power. Israel acts independently, potentially triggering the wider war Trump is trying to avoid. Russia and China gain influence. American credibility collapses globally. Scenario 2. Trump rejects Iran's terms. The 14-day deadline expires. Iran resumes operations against American assets. The casualty figures that have already caused political crisis continue climbing. The war that Trump's offer was designed to prevent arrives anyway, but now with the added complication that America showed weakness before fighting. Neither scenario ends well. Both scenarios are possible, and the decision between them will be made by a president whose strategic calculations are inseparable from his political survival calculations. This is why the world is watching Washington right now with something beyond concern, something closer to horror, because the most powerful country on earth is making decisions about war and peace based on factors that have nothing to do with war and peace. So let's be absolutely clear about where things stand right now. Trump sent a message to Iran's new supreme leader offering recognition, sanctions relief, and military withdrawal. This is confirmed through multiple sources. This is not speculation. Iran rejected the offer and issued a counter-ultimatum with a 14-day deadline. Iran's demands include $300 billion in frozen assets, full withdrawal from Iraq and Syria, and acknowledgement that American sanctions were illegal. Israel learned about Trump's offer through intelligence intercepts, not Allied notification. Netanyahu's response was described as extremely direct. Israel is threatening independent military action. Saudi Arabia has gone silent publicly while repositioning $930 billion in sovereign wealth assets. The money is moving in patterns that suggest preparation for fundamental regional change. Trump's own party is in open revolt. Senators are comparing him to Chamberlain on live television. The Republican caucus is divided. The political coalition that supports Trump's presidency is fracturing over this single decision. The Pentagon is simultaneously planning for withdrawal and escalation. CENTCOM doesn't know which orders are coming. The military is preparing for contradictory futures. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, is described by intelligence analysts as more ideologically rigid than his father, more willing to accept costs, more convinced that confrontation is destiny, and the 14-day clock is running. In 14 days, either negotiations begin on Iran's terms or Iran resumes military operations against American forces. There is no third option. There is no middle ground. There is only the choice between two versions of catastrophe. Trump's shocking response to Iran's new supreme leader wasn't shocking because it was aggressive. It was shocking because it was desperate. It was the response of a president who has seen the intelligence briefings, understands what's actually happening, and is looking for any exit that doesn't involve the war his administration has been stumbling toward for months. The problem is that Iran isn't offering an exit. Iran is offering terms that America cannot accept without accepting a fundamentally diminished role in the world, and the president who promised America first is now discovering what happens when another country decides it's their turn to be first. The next 14 days will determine everything, not just for the Middle East, not just for this presidency, for the shape of global power for the next generation. History doesn't give warnings, it just happens. It's happening right now. Pay attention.